Reddit, I need your judgment. I'm posting from a throwaway because my college town is basically a cul-de-sac with diplomas. For 2 years, I thought our marriage was built on late-night grading and early morning coffee. Then a rideshare receipt and a grocery list note cracked it open. What followed smelled like cinnamon gum and copier toner and felt like a trap that had my name pre-filled. I'm Nia, 29F, an academic advisor at a mid-sized university where the student union smells like fryer oil and the admin buildings smell like copier toner. I like the toner smell. It tells me there's order somewhere, even if it's microscopic and black. My husband, Lucas, 32M, is a visiting lecturer in history, union armies, labor movements, how strikes built the weekend. He runs at dawn, chews cinnamon gum until he forgets, and leaves the wrappers in tiny red-edged curls on every surface, and claims caffeine doesn't touch him. We rent a second-floor apartment above a breakfast place. Our bedroom smells like pancakes on Saturdays. One night in September, I was in the advising center printing degree audits when the queue jammed. A line item hung stubbornly with Lucas's username. The timestamp said 12:44 a.m. I frowned at the title. Eastgate Receipt. PDF. The Eastgate Motor Inn squats by the highway like a low-slung toad with a blinking sign in a parking lot that never quite dries. My brain offered helpful alternatives. Maybe Eastgate hosted some conference and he needed the receipt for reimbursement. Maybe he'd printed at my building by accident. We share the same network. I cleared the queue and the machine coughed out the rest of my work. Cinnamon drifted in when a student walked by chewing the same brand Lucas favors. I thought about texting him. Instead, I slid the weirdness into a pocket of my brain labeled "Deal with Later" and told a junior named Miles how to switch from pre-med to environmental science without detonating his life. The printer jam wouldn't leave. It sat in my mind like a paper cut. At home, I opened our email to send myself a calendar reminder, and there, under promotions, sat a rideshare receipt from 12:08 a.m. Pickup, campus drop-off, Eastgate Motor Inn. The total was $12.92, a bad omen of a number. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then closed the tab like I could unsee it if I moved fast. Lucas came in humming from a late lecture. He kissed my hair. His breath was cinnamon sharp. Pulled a long night, he said, dropping another metal water bottle in our growing collection. I smelled rain and a hint of industrial cleaner, the kind motels use. I told myself it was the gym. I told myself everything that kept oxygen in the room. The next morning, the campus air had that early fall temperature that confuses you into sweater weather at noon and goosebumps by 4. My office window looked onto a courtyard where someone always plays acoustic versions of songs that should be left alone. I made my to-do list with a pen that writes prettier than I deserve. Confirm degree plans. Email the student who thinks a 300-level class is a vibe, not a requirement. Ignore the rideshare receipt. Lucas texted a photo from his lecture hall whiteboard covered in dates, his scrawl like determined claws. Look at my art, he wrote. I hearted it. He followed with, don't wait up, late office hours, a kid's freaking about grades. I stared long enough to see the words go fuzzy. Office hours usually end by 7. But adjuncts hustle. They say yes to everything. I told myself his kid freaking out line was the truth wearing a slouchy sweater. I put my phone face down and walked to the student union for coffee because the office coffee tastes like hope left on the hot plate. On the way back, I passed the history department. The hallway smelled like chalk, cinnamon gum, someone else's, and that faint copper tang of old radiators. Lucas's door was closed. A post-it said, office hours, 10:12 to 4, not midnight. I didn't knock. I fed the copier a new box of paper and let the hum lull me the way it always does, mechanical bees steady in their work. That night I made chicken and rice. He texted at 11:40, lost track, be home late. I set aside a plate and ate at the counter under our too bright light. There's a moment when denial turns into a volunteer position, you're allowed to resign. I didn't. I drank tea and watched a video about how to clean a dishwasher filter and convinced myself I was doing something. He came home at 12:58 a.m. His shirt smelled freshly put on, not freshly worn. Cinnamon layered over something sour, a room deodorizer with ambitions. He hugged me and said, "You're still up?" Like he was surprised I existed. "Late office hours?" I asked. "Late everything," he said, and kissed my cheek as if proximity could gerrymander trust. Lucas has the kind of brain that makes lists for his lists. He keeps them in a notes folder on his phone called Groceries, which is really a series of mini-maps. Eggs, dish soap, copy paper, thoughts about a lecture. Sunday afternoon, he left his phone on the coffee table while he showered. It pinged with a reminder. Lemons, creamer, 607 towels. I stared. Our apartment is small. We don't have 607 of anything. I told myself not to touch his phone. Then I opened notes. The top entry said, Groceries. When I tapped it, a second page slid into view like a secret room. Instead of apples and dish soap, it was timestamps and initials. 1150 AREG 607, 1215 M, parking, 120 exit backstairs. My hands shook hard enough to blur the screen. Back in the shower, he sang a line of the same classic rock song he always sings on autopilot. I scrolled. Farther down, a Twitter handle appeared in a bullet point. Office hours, after dark, private. Under it, DMs only. No campus Wi-Fi. The last line read, Bring gum. I didn't need to guess which flavor. I took screenshots and airdropped them to my laptop, hands cold even though the apartment was warm from the breakfast place below. My heart beat loud in my ears, the same way it used to when the copier jammed during registration and students lined up with the same urgent face. When he came out, he smelled like our soap. He rummaged for gum. Where'd I put? Here, I said, handing him a fresh pack I'd bought that morning without thinking. He smiled and kissed the pack before tucking it in his pocket. The intimacy made me dizzy. That night, I created a burner Twitter and requested office hours after dark. It sat on pending, smug as a cat. My closest friend in town is our downstairs neighbor, Zara, 27F. She's a therapist in training at the counseling center, the kind of person who remembers your cat's anniversary of adoption and the fact that you prefer lemon to lime. Her apartment smells like dried orange peel and library books. She knocks with a rhythm that makes you want to open the door. She found me on the stairs Monday evening, hugging a laundry basket like a life ring. Your face, she said softly. You've got copier jam eyes. I told her everything on her couch, picking at the seam of a throw pillow that had seen better tenants. The rideshare, the Eastgate receipt, the notes with 607. The private Twitter, the gum. Saying it out loud made the apartment feel smaller, like the ceiling had lowered to keep secrets from floating too high. Zara didn't gasp. She poured chamomile tea that smelled like straw and said, Do you want comfort or clarity? I laughed because the universe has no chill. My coworker asked me that exact question, I said. Clarity. Okay, she said. Then we go slow and steady. You gather. No accusations without paper. Think seatbelts. 2 things. Set credit card alerts. And I have a friend in campus security who can give you your own key fob log if you ask as a spouse. It's property access for safety. You're not asking for his. That's legal? I asked, wary. You'd be requesting logs for your card, she said, but it might show patterns. Also, talk to your bank about temporary separation of funds. Not because we know anything yet, but because anger makes people spend. Her phone buzzed. She flipped it over like a person who refuses to be pulled from the room she's in. I'm here, she said. Whatever we do with daylight. We made a plan. I set the alerts. She texted her friend to ask how to request my fob history and what it could show. Building open times, not specifics. I copied my screenshots to a folder called Seatbelts, because that word had followed me through the week like a candle in bad weather. Do you want me to talk to him? She asked. Not yet, I said. He'll say I'm paranoid. I want paper to press against the glass. Zara squeezed my hand. Her fingers were cool. Her steadiness felt like a porch light I could see across a street. The alerts landed like pebbles in a jar. Tuesday, Campus Card History Building, 11:43 p.m. Then a charge, Eastgate Lounge 48. 10 at 12:19 a.m. My phone vibrated again. Thank you for your payment, Eastgate Motor Inn, room 607. I didn't know we had Apple Pay connected. We did. I drove to Eastgate at lunch because the thought of sitting under fluorescent lights, pretending to care about whether COM 240 should be taken before or after SOC 201, made me sweat. The motel lot smelled like hot asphalt and chlorine. The front desk clerk looked like he had seen every variety of wrong decision. I placed a 20 on the counter and said, "I'm doing our taxes and we lost some receipts. Last night, room 607? He slid a copy across with the bored grace of someone who deals hope and disappointment in equal measure. The signature line had Lucas's hurried scrawl. There's a physics to seeing your partner's handwriting under the word room. In the vestibule, a vending machine hummed. A woman with a backpack and a campus lanyard walked past, head down. I'm not an idiot. I know the power dynamics stew at the bottom of this kind of story. The thought made bile prick my throat. The idea that I might also have a Title IX problem sat heavy. I took a photo of the receipt and sent it to my seatbelts folder. I went back to campus and sat at my desk and answered emails like a person who wasn't floating an inch above herself. The copier jammed once. I fixed it without swearing, which is how I knew Shock had put a hand around my throat and said, "Hush." That night, Lucas came home with grocery bags. He'd bought lemons and creamer and a tiny bottle of hotel-sized shampoo I didn't recognize until I turned it over. Eastgate uses a generic brand with a ridiculous citrus name, Sunkiss or Sunkissed. I forgot immediately because my brain refused to store it. They had a promotion, he said, smiling like a man who has never been caught shipping evidence to his own kitchen. The gall of it almost snapped me out of grief. At 1:07 a.m., my phone pinged. Rideshare, pickup, Eastgate, drop-off, campus. I stared at the ceiling until the plaster looked like islands. I asked to meet at the faculty lounge during daylight because I couldn't bear secrets that only happened at 1 a.m. The lounge smells like burnt coffee and copier toner, which usually comforts me. Not that day. I know about Eastgate, I said, laying the copies down like cards. I know about room 607. I know about the Twitter account and the notes on your phone. I'd like you to be honest. If you don't want this marriage, say that. If there's someone else, say her name so I know who I'm grieving. Lucas blinked like I'd turned the overhead lights on too fast. Then he put on a face so tender, I wanted to punch the word tender in the throat. Nia, he said softly, you've been so anxious. Advising season always spins you out. You're connecting dots that aren't there. Eastgate? I met a visiting scholar who missed her train. We sat in the lounge until she could get a ride. The bill is mine because she didn't have the right card. Room 607 is a study group space. They rent them out for day use. After midnight, I said. He winced. It's quieter then. And the Twitter? He shrugged. A group chat we made because students are terrified of posting their questions in public. DMs keep them from embarrassing themselves. I handle it. I didn't add you because it's my work. Boundaries, right? The man had an answer for everything because he practiced like a debate kid. Bring gum, I said, reading from his note. He laughed, pitying. Do we want to do this? Chewing gum is a crime now? How about the ride shares at 12:08 a.m. to Eastgate and back at 1:07? His face hardened. You went through my email? That's controlling, Nia. You know that. He leaned in, voice low. I know you struggled after your dad died. I stood by you. I cooked when you couldn't. I didn't make you feel crazy. I'm asking for the same grace. It's a textbook move, flipping the table so fast you don't notice the plates. I could almost hear Zara's voice. Don't argue metaphors. Stay with the specific. So I did. Then who is the visiting scholar? I asked. What's her name? He shook his head, wounded. I won't drag a student into our marriage drama. You said scholar. He stood, straightening his shoulders. I won't be interrogated like this. If you want to continue this conversation, let's get help. We can do couples therapy. Unless what you want is a story where I'm a cartoon villain. If so, congratulations. You wrote it. He left with his hands in his pockets like a man who can afford to jog down a staircase without holding the rail. 2 nights later, I saw Zara through the diner window talking to Lucas. My stomach dropped to the floor and rolled under the booth. He was laughing. She was listening. They looked familiar. I backed away because I couldn't stand the thought that the one person who had felt like a porch light had been an accomplice, a lighthouse guiding him to the rocks where I lived. I went home and sat on the kitchen floor between the stove and the sink and cried the kind of cry that doesn't sound like anything. The apartment smelled like pancakes and cinnamon, and something that would always be a motel to me now. My phone buzzed. Zara. Are you home? Can I come up? I didn't reply. She came anyway. I didn't want to open the door. My hand did it for me because muscle memory is a traitor. She stepped in and closed it behind her, and before I could feed my anger, she said quietly, I've been meeting him on purpose. I stared. She held up her phone. I told you I had a friend in security. He got me the protocol for requesting your own records. That told me you were home the nights he said you weren't. It lined up with Eastgate charges. I also reached out to the counseling center because if a faculty member is meeting a student at a motel, that's not just cheating. That's a policy violation. I needed to know if anyone had whispered about him. I saw you with him, I said, at the diner. Yes, she said. I told him I'd been worried about you spiraling because of advising season. I asked him to explain what he thought was happening. He bragged. People like him brag when they feel admired. He told me he'd mentored a student who was lonely. He said the motel was safer for appearances than an apartment. He said he kept everything on a locked account. He said if you made a scene, he had texts about your anxiety he could show HR. She set her phone on the table. Audio recording. Lucas's voice, smooth as a spit-shined shoe. You just have to keep the narrative. Nia's sweet, but she catastrophizes. If she finds the receipts, I'll tell her it's a study group. No one wants a scandal. HR hates scandal. Then, softer, nastier. She loves her printers and checklists. She won't burn the place down. I went cold. Zara exhaled. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. If I warned you, he'd get cautious. I needed him confident so he'd tell on himself. Another ping. Zara's phone lit with a text from a number she labeled C screenshots from the private Twitter. A student DM. Can I please stop meeting at the hotel? It feels wrong. Lucas's reply from office hours. After dark. Hotels are neutral. Keeps me safe too. No proof. Stop overthinking. I sat down because my knees decided standing was a hobby, not a necessity. Zara slid a folder toward me. Title IX wants to meet with you, she said. They've already started. You're not a complainant at the moment, they have other reports. But your documentation will help. If you want to be a complainant, I'll sit next to you. If you want to be a witness and move on, I'll sit next to you for that too. I wanted to argue about the ethics of recording. I wanted to pick apart the steps. Instead, I listened to Lucas's voice with the cinnamon-cold certainty that the floor under us was real. News doesn't explode in a college town. It diffuses through coffee lines and faculty listservs and the undergrad rumor pipeline that moves faster than Wi-Fi. I met with Title IX in a room that smelled like copier toner and peppermint tea. The investigator had a voice that made people tell the truth in draft form first, then final with timestamps. I submitted the receipts and the rideshares and the notes. Zara submitted the audio. Their legal counsel said it was admissible as a record of a conversation she was a part of. The student whose DM we saw agreed to file a formal complaint. She had more. HR suspended Lucas pending investigation 2 days later. He texted me, "You ruined my career." Then, "We can fix this. Meet me at the diner." Then, "You owe me the benefit of the doubt." I didn't answer. Through his brother, he asked for clothes from the apartment. I left a box in the hallway labeled with his name, packed without malice shirts, ties, the sweater my mother gifted him that he wore in our engagement photos. I kept the cinnamon gum at the back of the pantry like a bad joke that would slowly expire. Lying on Zara's couch one night, I could smell the faint citrus of her cleaner and the ghost of fryer oil from downstairs. I can't tell where my grief ends and my humiliation begins, I said. That's normal, she said. They're twins at first. You'll learn which is which later. She did not tell me to be strong. She brought me water and a bowl of soup and let the quiet do more work than conversation ever could. Lucas sent a letter through his lawyer asking me to stop defaming him on social media. I had not posted anything. I wrote back through mine that any attempt to intimidate me would be added to the file. He went silent for 48 hours, then sent 12 texts in a row about how he missed our Saturday pancakes and how we'd be embarrassing ourselves if we split over misunderstandings. I read them in the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of batter from the restaurant. The phrase, misunderstandings, sat in my throat like a spoon handle. I let the text sit so still the word bubbles died of old age. I am not a bonfire person. I'm a paperwork person. So I did what paperwork people do. I met with a lawyer who wears flats and doesn't blink when clients cry. We filed for a legal separation with a financial hold, no joint funds for hotels, no moving money without notice, no accidental charges to the shared card. We asked the landlord to change the locks and reprogram the buzzer to my phone. We sent a calm letter to Lucas's department chair listing dates and receipts without adjectives. We included a line. Please direct any communication about my anxiety to my counsel. Zara gently nudged me to call my sister in Ohio, which I had been putting off out of shame. My sister cried in that older sister way that manages to be righteous and kind at once. She booked a flight without asking. She shows love through casseroles and moving boxes. She put my framed diplomas in bubble wrap like she was packing breakable teeth. Together we moved some of my clothes into Zara's extra dresser and agreed it was temporary. My apartment felt like a crime scene. Nothing dramatic, just a place where everyone knows what happened and the carpet won't tell. Title IX emailed to say Lucas had been barred from student contact until the investigation closed. HR asked if I needed accommodations at work. I changed my route so I wouldn't pass his hallway. The advising center felt like a refuge again. Toner, schedules, students whose drama was about swapping majors and moving off campus. I could breathe there without counting my breaths. Edit. For those asking if I confronted the student, I did not seek her out. She reached out to me through the investigator, asking if I'd be willing to share how I found what I found because she'd been second-guessing herself. We talked with the investigator present. I told her the phrase, neutral place is usually code for no witnesses, and that secrets you have to hold in your throat like a stone are not mentorship. She cried softly and then sat taller, like her spine remembered it had bones. A week later, Lucas's mother called to tell me I was ruining a good man over rumors. I said calmly, "Your son documented his locations for me. If you're worried about who ruined what, talk to the person who liked cinnamon gum and 12:19 a.m., receipts more than his marriage." She hung up on me. I made tea. I didn't set his things on fire. I labeled them with sticky notes like a midterm project. Sweaters, books, spices. I returned them without seeing his face. I kept 2 mugs because they were mine before us. Blue with tiny cracks like a map, and white with a chip where my finger sits just so. The apartment's smells reorganized themselves. Pancakes from below, lemon from the cleaner, toner from the stack of printouts I couldn't throw away yet. The cinnamon receded like a memory you can conjure, but don't have to live inside. I started walking loops around campus at dusk, when the lampposts click on and the cicadas make their electric chorus. I discovered a bench behind the library that faces a brick wall so close it forces you to look at details, ivy veins, mortar lines, the place where one brick cracked and someone patched it with a material almost the same color but not quite. It's ugly and honest and feels like me right now. Lucas texts sporadically about bills and furniture and how he saw a couple holding hands and thought of us. Sometimes he says he's grateful for what we had. Sometimes he says he's a victim of a smear campaign. I do not reply unless it's logistics. When I do, I write like a person filling out forms. Clear, neutral, dated. Zara and I learned how to be around the part where I saw her with him and my heart panicked. I told her I forgave her for the method before I felt like I did. Later, the feeling caught up. We buy croissants on Fridays and eat them on our steps with butter that melts too fast in our palms. She never tells me, "You're strong." She says, "You're here," which on some days is more radical. Here's the lesson, or at least the scar I can rub with my thumb. Gaslighting isn't always someone shouting you down. Sometimes it's cinnamon on their breath and a printer queue that cleans itself while you try to forget the file name. Sometimes it's a grocery list that has room numbers. Sometimes it's a person who says, "I won't drag a student into this," while walking her into a motel elevator. And here's the counter lesson, the one I'm still learning. Not every twist is a betrayal. Sometimes your confidant is quietly gathering evidence while you try to keep the roof from falling. And when the roof does fall, they already have a tarp and a hammer. I don't know yet if we'll divorce. The legal separation sits like a stack of papers on the corner of my desk. It doesn't breathe, but it is alive. I'm not ready to call myself single. I am ready to call myself someone who prefers daylight. If you need a verdict, Reddit, here's the only one I can render. I chose to walk away from a performance and toward paperwork. It isn't glamorous. It's quieter than I expected. Some nights the apartment hums with the copier in my head, spitting out pages of what-ifs. Most mornings, though, I make coffee in the blue mug and stand at the sink with the window open. The town smells like damp leaves and toner drifting up from the admin buildings and not like cinnamon. I like it better this way. Info? I've given you what I have. Why Tanta decide as you will. I'm choosing rebirth, boring and legal in mine.